Hi guys, welcome to round 2 of designing a toy robot. We left off after the third silhouette and I just spent another 15-20 minutes to create another 9 silhouettes, so we have a total of 12. Then line them up so that I could evaluate them, and what we'll do right now is evaluate them together, and then I'll take these silhouettes and use them as a guide as I actually start designing these robots in a little bit more detail. So having them lined up here, now clearly I can notice that I went from pretty simple to adding a little bit more complexity and so forth. But in order to help us evaluate these, I bring back the words that we wrote in the beginning of the last round. I'll bring them a little bit here and closer so I can read them. Just to remind us that it needs to be a toy, retro-looking, simple, basic, and modular. And I realize now that I put simple twice, but well, let it be. With this criteria, the ones that call my attention the most, I think, is I think this first one fits that criteria. It's a little bit generic looking, but I think it has some interesting things happening with the arms and the shoulders and the thick to thin. I actually really like this one. I like the overblown hands and head. I also think this eye gives him quite a bit of personality. I would like to explore that further. I like this little dude. The torso and the head are squished into one, and I probably want to add a head. I'm not sure yet, but I'll leave him in the mix for now. This next one, the next two, and this one down here and this one down here kind of all feel a little bit the same. They all became over complex with a lot of small parts. I will keep one of them because I think it's good to have a variety, and I'm intrigued with what's happening here on top of the shoulders of this guy. I hate the head, the Mickey Mouse-esque head, but we can fix that. And I think I'm gonna go with that one. I think this guy right here is interesting, has quite a bit of personality, but it's getting similar to what's happening up here, and I think the one on top works better. Alright, so I think those are the 4 I'll pick. Number 1, number 3, number 4, and number 11. I'll still keep these just in my back pocket if I need to go back and look at them, but what I'll do is that I'll create a new layer. I duplicate that layer, I'll hide these words now. I'll go in and delete all the ones that we didn't want, which was this. All of them, let's delete them. Okay, these signs can be deleted too. Then I'll just bring them together. Like that. And I'll blow it up. And some of them will go off the page. That's fine, doesn't matter at all, because as I'm designing designing these, I can just move these this way. Okay, so I'll take these silhouettes down to about 20-ish, enough that I can see them. It's actually still a little bit too much. 15 is good, enough that I can see the silhouette. I hope you guys can see it too. Maybe I'll bring it up to 20 too, so that you guys can see it. Enough that I can see it, but not so strong that it will guide me too much. It's supposed to be there to help me and guide me, but not to not to decide every stroke that I do. So I create a new layer on top of it, and the kind of brush that I'm using it's a generic brush that comes with Photoshop CS6, CS5, and CC. I'll make it bigger now so that you can see. But what I like is basically that it has a little bit of fade in it. I think it has 6 layers of automatic fade. So as I'm doing my strokes, it has a little bit of that, and works for me. Okay, I'll delete that layer, start a new one. And as I'm thinking through this, I'll start with the areas that I'm most that I have a best idea of what I want to do, like that I'm most confident with. I'll blow up the silhouette a little bit bigger, so that you can see more clearly. Here we go. Oops. And since I'm designing here on the left side of my canvas, I can bring these references up if I need them. Right now I find them kind of distracting, but I'll most likely go back and look at them. First thing I'll do is I'll start with the shoulder over here. Oh, my new layer. And I'll lock this silhouette layer, by the way, so that I don't accidentally get on the wrong layer. Okay. So there's no real method here, more than that I'm kind of thinking of the bigger shapes first, from big to thin, you know. Very similar to how I did before. I most likely just approach half of it and then duplicate that. I'm imagining this torso sitting on top of some kind of a thin structure over here, and this thin structure in 3D probably would look something like this, and has pivot points this way, you know, and this is where you would stick this in. And I think of these things, but obviously the 3D modeler might have a different way, and it's just good to have a good communication. And right now all of these views will just be front-on views, so it leaves some stuff up for interpretation, which is fine. Whether you could either give the 3D modeler some more detailed sketches, or leave it loose and have them have some creative input as well. As you can tell, I'm not staying true to my silhouette and to 100%, and that's fine. You don't have to. As I said before, it's just a guide to make sure that you, it's almost like an upfront investment to guide you towards the right direction. And if you don't like it as you're designing, that's totally fine. Okay. I try to not get too hung up on the details yet. Overall, making sure that things start looking correct. I haven't added, you know, any shadows or shading or those kind of things. That will come later. For now, still just very basic how I'm imagining here. Seeing this as having some kind of a, if we could see through, being some kind of a joint like this and like that, some kind of a joint like this and like that, you know. And I think about these things as I'm designing it. Okay. Now can start adding a little bit more details here and there. Maybe these pads have some kind of rivets along the way. Trying to make sure that my brush strokes just guides the modeler to what I'm trying to do. This being a very flexible, thin part of the arm, while the forearm here is a chunkier block. Maybe it has some kind of a detail here, some kind of a light. Maybe there's a second, oops, sorry, maybe there's a second pivot right here. So there's one pivot up there and there's one pivot down there. That makes sense for the anatomy of this robot. Okay. And there. Delete that, take that, duplicate that, again flip it horizontally, match it up, move it to where I think it fits. You see he's a little bit too skinny there, so I'll make him a little bit wider than what the silhouette suggests. That's totally fine. Do I like that? Yes. Then I merge these two layers. Give him a quick evaluation. Okay. Then I continue refining. Don't like this light thing that's happening here. Start cleaning up some of these things. And as you're noticing, I'm just cleaning up one side, because most likely what I will do is do half the work and then again just copy, paste, and then and it saves me half the time, you know. All right. Kind of like what's happening there. I'm imagining that to be some kind of an area that would look something like this if it was drawn in perspective. So not sure, that's probably not a pivot, but it's some kind of a cap there, and I'm liking where that is going. I wouldn't mind if he had some kind of a vent. Maybe they're happening right here. And I'll probably add some kind of a numbering here on top of the chest plate. But I'll do that last. Okay, now it's time to refine his head a little bit. I felt that the proportions of the head became a little bit too square. And I'm gonna instead try to pick up some of these angles that are happening here, the shoulder and the arm, and try to bring them in, bringing some of those angles into the head to make it feel a little bit more cohesive. And this piece right here starts mimicking what's happening down there at the leg. And I think when you're designing things in general, like, there's something to be said about a brand language. And even though this robot doesn't have a brand, but when there are cues and elements that are repeated, not repeated too much, but repeated enough that you start seeing patterns, it often makes a design feel pretty cohesive. And the head just didn't jive well with the rest of the body. Okay, I think that works a little bit better. I want to pick up like this overhang that is over here, and see if I can do some similar kind of an overhang here on the face, and I think that's gonna work. Lastly, these little rivets too, I think I'll do something similar like that there, so that kind of feels correct. Alright. His legs here are really, really thin. And it's not the most practical way of walking, but I actually kind of like that the juxtapose of really thin, almost spiky things that he walks to, and this heavy upper body and big arms and big shoulder pads. Not very functional, but that's okay. It creates some visual interest, and for what we're doing right now, I think it's okay and it's appropriate. So just deleted that half. Duplicate him again. Flip it. Match it to where I felt it worked. Look at it, reevaluate it. And just those small changes, I think, work. Another way to reevaluate it is without that silhouette, and I think that works. Simple, not very detailed, but I think it works. It feels correct. I will add the eyes. I'm lucky here that I have a couple of brushes that makes the work for me, just perfect circles. And I kind of like these different size eyes. Oops. Let me see that. Now I don't like it as much, actually. I worked on the silhouette, but not here. So let me see. Maybe I do something like this instead. Delete that. Give him... Yeah, the two different size eyes give the robot a little bit more of a friendly and kind of a almost nerdy look, but his body and arms doesn't suggest that. So I'll give him one dominant eye in the middle, and I'll add some kind of a techiness to that. Maybe it's a little bit of a light pipe that goes down from that eye. And as you've noticed, I haven't really zoomed in. I wasn't perfectly in the middle. My apology. Maybe the manufacturing guys, when they were building this robot, had a hard time with it. Anyway, as you've noticed, I haven't really zoomed in. It's not necessary in this phase, I think. If I did, obviously I could be a lot more detailed and like make sure that I hit all the lines perfectly. But I think for what I'm doing right now, staying at this level, it's totally okay and appropriate. Now when I merged these two, I'm noticing that this rhythm here got interrupted, and that's a really quick fix. Those two lines are not following the same rhythm. Now I'll just eliminate them and do one like that. Looks much better. Cool, works. The last thing I'll do is I'll actually give him some kind of a number. Just seems appropriate. I'll give him a number. Number 5. I'm trying to stay with this kind of techie theme here. I could just go in and find a font, but in this case I won't. I'll just write it out. All right. Okay, good enough. The next thing I could do, just to indicate a little bit more to the modeler what's happening, without spending too much time, is that I go into the magic wand tool, click outside, I go into select, modify, expand. I'll expand with about 3, it should be enough. And then what I do is that I inverse that selection. So everything that was inside that now is selected. Then I'll just go in with a very simple, maybe a mid-tone gray. And I fill him in without being overly detailed. It just gives him gives it a silhouette, and it makes it a little bit easier to read. But staying in that gray, and I can go in and add a black, and I'll just hint suggestions for where the shadows are. So for example, and right now I'm doing it all in black, but you'll see in just a minute that is gonna give a little bit of indication what's happening. And I'm not trying to spend a lot of time doing this, just quick hint to help to read the shapes and the forms of what's happening. It's not at all trying to make him look rendered or finished, but more than anything just a suggestion of what these shapes are doing. And many times the sketch alone helps to indicate that, but not always. And if something takes me, a minute to do, and save somebody else in the other side of the pipeline some time, or then I think it's worth it. Okay, now that all that black, I'll just take it down to around 30, and I will also make softer transitions where there are soft transitions. So, whoops, that was a brush. I wanted an eraser. So for example, right here, it's soft. Trying to indicate that these are kind of tubes or cylinders going into those pivot points. I can do the very same thing with white. So what I do is if I go to the original color layer, press Command, click, I get that selection, and then I go in, take a white, and I want a hard brush, and I go in under the sketch layer. Just suggest a little bit of highlights in some of these. I'm doing these on top of the cylinder so that it can read that it's a round shape, and bring out some of these surfaces to the front. Some of these flexible areas. Here we go, indicating that that kind of tapers out. Here we go. And then again, trying to soften some of this up. And then take that down probably to 50. All right, very, very simple. Basically one sketch layer, then underneath it added a simple gray, some black that I took down to 30%, some white that I took to 50%, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks, guys.